Welcome to another program we call Perspectives El Paso. I'm Leon Blevins, retired professor of government at El Paso Community College and a member of the EPCC television team now. This is October of 2017. Just recently, I attended a function at the Valle Verde campus, and the guest speaker was John Quinones of ABC Television, of a program called What Would You Do? At that program, a young woman comes up to me and she says, I need to be on your television show. In fact, my husband and I, and she introduced me to her husband, and said, we need to be on your television show. And I said, tell me why. And she said, well, I'm a writer and my husband is a cartoonist. And we have some projects that we're working on. This young lady I had seen on our campus, but I didn't know what she taught, did not remember her name very well. And so we visited a little while, and I said, okay, let's do it. Let's put you on the show. So that's who is here today. Oh, Elvira Carrizal-Dukes.
Yes.
Did I get it right?
Yes, you did. Thank you.
Well, we're glad that you came up to me and introduced yourself.
And
this is your husband. You may introduce him to the audience.
Okay, this is Ronnie Dukes, everybody.
Right.
And he's an artist and illustrator.
Okay, and we see some of his work here on display. We're going to talk about some of these things. Now, I don't remember that you told me what you teach, which departments you're in. Okay. The few times I've seen you at diversity programs that I've been to.
Yes.
And you've been a volunteer. But what do you teach, and are they most of the time at Valle Verde campus?
Okay, I teach in the mass communication discipline. I'm an assistant professor, and I mostly focus on the video and film production courses. I also teach introduction to film and mass media and society. And in the spring, I'll be teaching writing for the electronic media. And I'm also an advisor for the film club. So I do a lot. My background is in film production, theater production, and Chicano studies. And so I kind of am in all those media areas that I work in.
And where did you learn all of this stuff? Where did you go to school?
So I went to, first it started at Gadsden High School. That's where I graduated from in Anthony, New Mexico.
Okay.
I grew up in Chaparral, but there was no high school there when I was growing up, so I had to cross the mountains to go to high school.
Okay.
And a guidance counselor pulled me into her office one day and she said, you need to apply to go to college. And I had no idea what she was talking about, but it was, for me at that time, it was a way to get out of class and not have to go to calculus. And so I applied and I got a full scholarship to the University of Minnesota in Minneapolis. And so I moved across the country, had never been there before, didn't even know anything about it. I mean, we didn't have internet like we do today or smartphones, so I would have had to have gone to the library and actually look at a map to see where Minnesota was.
So that was an education in itself.
Exactly, yes. And so I got my bachelor's degree there in Minneapolis. I studied Chicano studies, journalism. Specifically, I focused on documentary production, and I minored in theater arts. And then after I graduated, I tried working for CBS News because I thought I wanted to work in news, but then I quickly found out that that was not what I wanted to do, and I was really gravitating more towards the documentary production as well as the theater arts. So I decided to combine those two things, my love for narrative fiction writing and my love for video production and working with cameras and editing and especially working with actors. I really enjoy doing that. So I decided to look up a film school, and I knew I didn't want to go to the West Coast. I wanted to go to the East Coast. And so I narrowed in on New York City, and I looked up Columbia University, and I fell in love with their description of their program, and they focus very heavily on narrative storytelling. So I knew that that's where I wanted to go, so I applied. I got accepted and went to school there, and I got my Master of Fine Arts in Film. And I focused on directing and screenwriting. And so now I'm back in El Paso, and I'm working on a doctoral degree in rhetoric and writing studies.
Well, welcome back to El Paso. We're
Thank
glad
you.
that we got you back.
Yes, I'm happy to be back.
What a journey. And then Ronnie Dukes.
Yes.
Tell us about your background and how the two of you came together.
Well, I grew up drawing. I've been an illustrator since as far back as I can remember, thanks to encouragement from my family, my grandmother, my father, my mom. And I was actually in a program called Gallery 37 in Chicago, which taught me as a high schooler how to be a professional artist. It was a program that taught kids over the summer in different genres or different mediums of art, and they would sell all of our work to the tourists who would come to Chicago, and so that helped invigorate my passion for illustration and drawing. And I met Elvira at school, undergrad in University of Minnesota, and I immediately fell in love, first of all.
Well, that helps.
Yes, exactly. But also too, we immediately started to click together artistically and creatively. She worked on plays back during undergrad, and I helped with set design and some of her productions. And moving to New York later on was kind of a struggle, especially coming from a place like Minnesota. New York is a very expensive place. And so I actually would find pieces from construction sites, really great found pieces, and paint them. And I would actually sell those found art paintings on the street at Harlem on 125th Street, and met a lot of really wonderful people there for sure. But one of the people who I met was actually an administrator from Columbia University who actually invited me to have my first solo show. And so I had my first solo show at Columbia and have been having shows of my paintings and exhibits from then on. I've had about 15 or so at this point. And but now I've always wanted to put everything together, make something extremely concise and tell a story. And so that led us to moving in to do more comic books and graphic novels.
Yes.
Because I felt like I wanted to put it all together and have you enjoy something from start to finish.
So this is actually a comic book.
It is.
And it's compared to some comic books, it's fairly thick.
It is.
It
Graphic
tells-
novel.
It's
Yeah.
a graphic novel.
Exactly,
okay?
yes.
And did you help write the text,
I
the
did.
dialogue?
It started off as a screenplay I wrote 8 years ago, and I tried to make it into a film. I shot a practice, I guess if you could call it that, in Chaparral, New Mexico, where I grew up. I got one business owner, Raymond Palacios. He's the CEO of Bravo Chevrolet, and he gave me a check for $5,000. And so we tried shooting a version of it over a span of 23 days consecutively. But in the end, it was just not, the project that I was trying to create or produce. I used all local talent, my friends, my family, students. And it has some action, so there's a lot of military, and it was really difficult to to recreate that with a very low budget and with hardly no support from like Fort Bliss. It's really difficult to get into Fort Bliss. Like you have to be a major Hollywood production to get them to participate. So it was a great try, and but what was great about it is that I had completed storyboards for the whole movie production, and we had all this practice footage that we had shot. And so after 4 years of trying to make it into a film, that's when I decided, we need to maybe think of a different form to produce this story in. And so that's when I asked Ronnie, I said, I know you want to make comics and graphic novels, so why don't we just make this into our graphic novel? And then
So this basically, it was a 4-year project?
8 years. So I worked on it for 4 years trying to make it into a film. And then after I kind of said, okay, I need to rethink this, come up with a different plan, then it took Ronnie another 4 years to do the entire book. He did all the illustrations, the inking, the coloring, the lettering, and then just even the formatting and putting it together so that it can be published.
Now, I know it costs money to do all of these things. What are your outlets to get this out there so the public buys it? We're going to give you a chance to put a telephone number or a website or whatever you wish at this point, so that they can know in case they're interested in this kind of work. Let's do that right now.
Sure, okay. Well, AWOL is available on Amazon Kindle, and it's also available on Comixology, which is the largest digital database for comics in the world right now. It's also available at the El Paso Museum of Art, which we're really happy about as well, for El Pasoans who actually want to see the book and flip through it as well to see like all of the things that we feature from the city in there. The book is also available through Baker & Taylor, a Follett company. What that means is it's available to all libraries. and all retail outlets, because that's their outlet that they use to actually order from and get what's the word, guaranteed service from. So yeah, Baker and Taylor Follett is probably our biggest distributor right now.
Okay.
Yeah.
So a number, telephone number?
I don't have a number.
We have a website.
Website. Okay,
yes,
we're going to
absolutely.
scroll across here at this point. A
Okay.
website.
Yes.
Okay.
Okay, what is
so
that?
the website is www.dukescomics.com.
Okay.
And we don't currently have it at the EPCC El Paso Community College Library, but it will be in their collection very soon. I just need to give them a copy. But there are many libraries in the Chicago area that have already put it in their libraries. And they've even asked us to Skype with them. So we've Skyped with the library in sort of the suburbs of Chicago, because they found out about Ronnie, and of course they're proud of their hometown talent as well. And so our goal is to really get into as many libraries as possible so that it's available for free for readers.
Now, what section of the library do you find this in?
You will find it most times in the young adult section. And so it's like the teen section of graphic novels. But a lot of times graphic novels are just sort of always put together, sort of lumped together and put in the young adult section. Many people think graphic novels and comic books are meant for a young audience because it's pictures. But the content of many graphic novels and comic books is actually more for mature audiences. But I feel like if you think of someone like Alexi Sherman, who did his young adult, there's a lot of, deep content, more mature content, but it's still suitable for teenagers. Exactly, yes. So.
Well, I grew up with comic books as a teenager, and I wish I'd saved all those comic books. It'd be valuable today.
Sure.
But Superman and Batman and the Marvel comics, for example. And I remember as a teenager, then we began to see comic books about the Korean War. A different kind of feeling about those.
Sure.
Fighting, dying, and all of those things. And then in modern times, we've seen some comics turn very dark. And we see yours are bright. You may be dealing with some dark issues. I can see some of that in some of the images you have there.
Sure, absolutely.
But you prefer something that is bright. What brought this about?
That was a conscious decision to embrace the art of comics, honestly. I've drawn and illustrated in dark tones before, and that would have probably matched. Certainly a black and white format would have matched the tone as well. It's a very noir kind of story, like a detective-y kind of story. But I wanted to really embrace some of the more classic aspects of comic art, like screen tones and patterns, and really bringing about like a richness, and vibrancy in the work, and that's what I hope comes across with AWOL.
Now this is very slow and laborious. I know that Carol Barquin, who is working with us on this show right now, and she's into all of these kind of areas, and she asked you about, is this sometimes boring? I want to ask that question.
Sure, yeah. Especially when you're working on your own and not necessarily with a team, because usually in comics there is a penciler, and there's an inker, and there's a colorist, and there's a letterer. This is a complete team that's all working together on one. But I did it all myself, and without having a boss or someone who's wants to see the progress as you go along, it was very difficult to maintain the necessary drive to do it every day. And so what I had to do was just really develop a pattern of thinking and just kind of zone into it every day the way you would a labor, and just kind of just go with it that way.
Now imagine she's here sometimes to kind of prod you along and say, okay, you're kind of down on yourself today, and let's go for a walk, or let's do something, and you go back to it.
Yes.
Don't you do this? You have to kind of do this to him?
Yeah, I mean, we have so many projects going on that at any moment we're talking about any number of projects that we're working on. So even while Ronnie was working on the comic book, the graphic novel version, I was already moving on to other projects as well. So
Sure.
I mean, we stay very busy, and what drives us the most, I guess what motivates us the most, is when we have a specific deadline that we're trying to work toward.
Absolutely.
So for example, with AWOL, the thing that really helped us cross that finish line was El Paso Comic-Con. And that was this past April in El Paso, Texas in 2017. And so when we found out that that was going to be happening, we said, okay, this has to be our premiere. Like, we want to premiere this in El Paso because it features El Paso. And so that was really what kicked us in the butt and made us cross that finish line.
Absolutely.
And so a lot of times, or for example, right now I'm working on a musical, and I know that the El Paso Museum of Art is going to be staging it sometime in the spring, like in April or March of 2018. So that's my hard deadline. So right now I'm like extremely motivated to get that finished, finish typing the script and then cast my, the actors. And so a lot of times it's opportunities or people who approach us and say, we need something by this date. And then we're just driven, and that's what helps us finish.
Exactly. I've been to Comic-Con as Uncle Sam. Have you seen me as Uncle Sam?
Yes, I have, on campus.
On campus. And my granddaughter, I think it was the year before, that's Taya Rose, finishing Eastwood High School, and she was with a modeling agency, and the agency had a bunch of the models go to Comic-Con, and she went dressed as Captain America, and I was down there as Uncle Sam, and we had a fun time doing that. Those are fun events.
They are. They're a lot of
One
fun.
of my favorite characters that I met, the person that attended Comic-Con that got dressed up, was a Pachuco Batman. And only in El Paso would you see that, this mixture of culture, of the Chicano culture with, a more mainstream hero. So I thought that was really interesting, how local people sort of interpret their own ideas of comic book heroes.
Right. Now then, these are advertising pieces, right?
Yes, we had these.
Where do you put these? What locations do you find that are willing to accept these? Put them in the window or something?
Well, for these in particular, this is kind of like how we used to advertise ourselves during Comic-Con. Because, when you go to Comic-Con, there's a lot of, there's a sensory overload. All the colors, all of the artwork. There's artwork everywhere you see. So one of the things that that works to your benefit is to have something that people can see from a distance. And so we use this to create an AWOL tower of artwork, so that from every direction you can kind of see this El Paso artwork to kind of bring in the local El Pasoan who's like, wow, I'm so happy to see my city in an actual book. Were you able to have a table set up where you were a vendor and people could buy them there?
Exactly,
yes, we did. And we actually sold out. It was our first time selling the book, which we actually got in a week before Comic-Con. That's when we got our first published. Yeah, exactly.
We barely made it.
Yeah.
Timing is everything.
Timing it is. And we actually sold out, and we're so grateful to everyone who came out. We had a lot of soldiers who came from Fort Bliss, El Pasoans who came from everywhere in Las Cruces, Chaparral, New Mexico, a lot of different places.
I think I need to get the crew here to bring tracking devices and clip on your ankles or something, because we don't want you being stolen by some other community and you moving off. Because we talk about quality of life and bond issues and building buildings and all that, but quality of life is about people. It's about individuals that are creative and contributing to the community. I want to thank you for adding to the quality of life of El Paso, Texas.
I really appreciate that. Thank you, because that really is a mission of ours. We really want to create works that highlight important issues that the community cares about, but also we want to highlight our city in a fantastic way. A lot of times when you look at films that supposedly take place in El Paso, Texas, it's like this desert town with a tumbleweed that's just rolling by the camera, and that is not how I personally, or how Ronnie wants to depict El Paso, Texas. I mean, we're a growing metropolis, and we're made up of so many different people, and there's always movement in our city, constant movement. And the downtown district, how it's just thriving in the arts, and so there's just so much going on right now in El Paso, Texas, and that's one of my goals as an artist, is to put El Paso on the map. We want to insert ourselves into discourse. So when people talk about comic books, for example, they can't say where are all the women comic book writers, because now I can say, well, I'm one, and I'm a Latina comic book writer. And so we're trying to insert ourselves into discourse, but also insert El Paso, Texas into discourse. And so when people talk about the arts, we want them to think about our city because of the products that are coming out of here. And we're just one of a huge community. I mean, we've met so many artists in El Paso that are all supportive of each other, and they're all doing amazing things.
Wow, very true. Yes.
Two quick stories here. Located very close to us. Luby's Cafeteria. I had one of my previous guests. He and I went out to lunch one day, and a man comes up to me and he puts his finger on my cheek. He was with a woman and they were in line, and he does like this, and I said, "Excuse me," and he said, "You're real. I see you on television. Now I know you're real." And I said something like, "You're not real unless you are on television."
Oh, nice.
And then another one just a few blocks away, Corner Bakery. My wife was with me, and we were sitting there eating. A man sitting over by himself at a table. A lot of people, guests leaving or coming over and talking to me and walking out. This man gets up and comes over and he says, "Excuse me, who are you? I want to talk to you. I want to meet you because all these people are coming over and visiting with you." I said, "Well, I'm a television personality, and I have a program called Perspectives El Paso, and you do watch it. It comes on, for example, on Sunday afternoon on Channel 13 at 1:30 in the afternoon on Sundays." And then he said, "Well, okay, good." And he said, "I want to tell you, I'm from El Paso, lived in Dallas for 12 years, and I came back. El Paso is a much more exciting and interesting place to live than Dallas, and much friendlier." I said, "Well, welcome back to El Paso." And he told me he works for the city of El Paso, the city government in some form. So don't you find this true also? You're in the mass communications, that some people don't believe anything is true unless they see it on television or in the movies.
Or on Twitter.
Or on Twitter, yeah, exactly.
No, and I think you're doing exactly what I feel we should all do, which is, put ourselves on the map. So you're inserting yourself into television, into public television. And sometimes there are not going to be people, and I tell this to my students, you may not have someone come up to you and say, "Hey, I want to put you on TV," or "I want to publish a book of yours," or "I want to give you a gallery to display your work." Sometimes you have to do it yourself, especially when you're first starting out. You have to come with the ideas, and you have to find the people who can help you. And you have to take the initiative to put yourself out there, because a lot of times nobody else is going to come and do it for you.
Yeah, and you have to be careful that you don't come along as haughty or self-serving.
That's true.
And I try to make it fun. When I do like this experience with these two gentlemen, have a good time with it and fun with it, but not bragging about I am the greatest television. And notice I did not say television star.
Right.
I tell people I'm not a television star. I'm a television personality.
Exactly.
Because sometimes stars get the feeling they're too high up in the sky.
Exactly.
And they can be brought down very fast.
So I always tell my students and anyone I meet, I'm a writer, I'm an educator. I'm very proud of those two things, and these creative, artistic talents that we have, I feel are they're inherited, right? They're God-given, or whatever your beliefs are. But if we could all write and be creative and be artists, then we would all be doing it, and not everybody is doing it. So I feel like I'm just doing what I was blessed to be able to do. And that's people always say, what keeps you going, right? Because it's a hard business, especially film, to break into. And I say, well, if I don't do it, I feel like I'm not breathing. For me, what I do, the production and the creative, it's my way of breathing and living. And if I'm not doing those things, I feel like I'm not fulfilling my purpose.
Right. I just had a conversation with Mary Yanez, a colleague of mine. She has a program called Mature Living on this same channel. And we were talking about El Paso does have this situation, is a lot of people, they want everything for free.
Yes.
They want everything for free. If you have a yard sale, they want to give you very little for it. If they have some event going on, such as Mary's putting together right now, is if you tell them you're charging $8 or something, they say, "No, I don't want to pay $8. Is it free?"
Right.
And this is a problem too, because you can't spend all of your time giving it all away.
Sure, exactly.
You will go bankrupt if you do
Absolutely.
all of this work. You do all of your work and you give it for free. You need something to pay the bills.
Exactly.
So how do we work on that in El Paso? How do we convince people to share a little bit of their wealth with people that are creative? There's a tough question.
Yeah. And really, I feel like, part of it is expanding people's perspectives, not to use it as a
There
as a
you
pun,
go.
but
It
you
has
know,
to be quality work
it has to
and
be
then expand their perspective.
absolutely. And like for instance, there's a lot of very talented. I've noticed like when Don Bluth came to town very recently. You had Doug Poland on last week, and it reminded me like there's a lot of young animators who came out of the woodwork. I did not realize that there was a lot of young people who were trying to learn on their own how to animate in El Paso, and there's no animation school or any particular resource.
So you're talking about the Classic Film Festival where these people came.
The
And they
Plaza Classic Film
were showing-
Festival.
And you got to go and meet Don Bluth and the others?
Don Bluth and
see their
Jerry
exhibit
Goldman.
at the Art Museum?
Absolutely, and it was a wonderful tour through the museum, hosted by El Paso Museum of Art, and it was enlightening because they were so generous with their knowledge, and they were trying to give myself and all of these other people the tools with which to use to tell your own story, tips and tricks and things like that. And I think that once we all start to tell our own stories, for lack of a better term, the check writers will start to understand, you know, where we're all coming from, and then hopefully we can gain some kind of common ground.
Well, Elvira mentioned that a businessman gave her some money to work on a project.
Yes.
And it wasn't exactly the quality that you wanted, evidently, but you learned from that.
Definitely.
And then you can convince maybe someone else to help finance a project at the art museum that you're going to be doing your program for.
I think also we need to advocate for people to be conscious of art. You know, art is everywhere. You get in the car, you turn on the radio, you're listening to art, you know, music. You pick out your clothes, somebody designed that. You know, somebody took time to create what we wear. What we look at, the way you design your home, you know, that's art. The way you decorate your home is art. I mean, art is everywhere, and people take it for granted, you know, that there are artisans, you know, people who take time, lots of hours, laborious hours to create something that you want or need, you know, to enhance your life, right? So if people would just be more conscious of the fact that art is everywhere and there's somebody behind the scenes that created that, and then we would start to realize how important the arts are to our life. I mean, even our technology, there was an artist behind the design of technology.
Our time is gone. It's awful that it runs out so fast, but I love, that's a beautiful way to end it.
Yes.
Art is everywhere. Thank you,
Thank
artists,
you.
for being on my show today.
Thank you.
I'm Leon Blevins. This is Perspectives El Paso. Tune in and you'll meet some other interesting guests in the future. Thank you very much.